Good morning, folks. My name is Kevan. I'm the founder and CEO of Arrowhead 3 and also creator of the Story War Academy. Welcome to this first of 3 webinars where we're going to talk about the 3 tests of a great or winning sales and a marketing message. This will be the first of 3, and we're going to be pulling some of the content for today's session from the Story War Academy, various lessons. So you'll see some of the recordings, and you'll see some recordings of me. How do you know if I'm live? I've got the headphones on and I'm wearing the blue shirt. So perhaps one of the toughest of all the tests when it comes to a sales or a marketing message is this one question. And this one question, is, what do you do? What do you do? So imagine 60 Minutes showing up on your doorstep and they wanted to highlight companies that were successful in your space, and they wanted to use you as an example. So this happened with a company called Razorfish many years ago. This is one of my favorite videos. Watch and listen to how they answered this test and see if they had a winning sales message. If you can't hear it, raise your hand or let me know.
It's here that Jeff and Craig launched Razorfish, which is now worth $4 billion. One of the most successful companies on the web. Successful at what? Good question.
We've asked our clients to recontextualize their business. We've recontextualized what it is to be a services business.
You know, there are people out there, such as myself, who have trouble with the word recontextualize. Tell me what you do in English.
We provide services to companies to help them win.
So do trucking firms.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
What is it you do?
And our talent is to do a certain thing, whereas a trucking firm.
But what is it you do?
We radically transform businesses to invent and reinvent them.
That's still very vague.
Business strategy.
Translation: teaching established companies how to make more money and reach more customers through the internet, or something like that.
Maybe it's indiscreet of me to ask how much you're worth, but how much are you worth?
I don't know, that may be indiscreet of you to ask. Somewhere around 180 million.
$180 million.
So they didn't realize it, but at the time they were in a story war. And if you look at the stock, what happened right after that broadcast, bad things happened to their company after that. Okay, so when you think about the story war, what is the story war? Well, watch this clip and see if this sounds familiar to you.
Think about it. Every day, many times a day, each one of us is trying to sell or convince someone of something. And when we are beaten out by ideas, products, solutions, or qualifications that are inferior to ours, I call this losing the story war. Now, some story wars happen at work, some at home, or among friends, but most often we're not conscious we're in a fight when it happens. For example, if you are going to your boss asking for a raise, or maybe even to keep your job, but the budget's already been cut, you're in a story war. If you're part of a software team that is feeling pressure from a competitor with a new product, and you're struggling to keep your product relevant, you're in a story war. If you're trying to convince your kids that playing video games all Saturday is not a good idea when there's yard work to be done, you're in a story war. If you're attempting to defend your video gamer's pride when your non-gamer friends mock the idea of esports ever becoming an Olympic event, you're in a story war. Now, each person in these examples has their own narrative, their own story, and being able to recognize another person's story and knowing when and how to best ask them to make your story theirs is a skill often overlooked. You see, your ability to persuade, communicate, and connect with others is the most important soft skill you can develop, regardless of the field or your position.
So in the story war, so why do people lose the story war? Well, there's a handful of things that I see. Take a look at this clip where I break down some of the most common mistakes people make with sales messaging and in their own story wars.
But why do folks lose their story war? Are there common mistakes or habits that they fall into? So having seen thousands of messaging pursuits and being a very curious observer of people, I find the 5 most common reasons why people lose their story war are: first, they fail to listen or observe. There is a treasure vault with the doors wide open to those who will take the time to learn the story of their audience. Second, they give too much information, showing an uneven scoreboard of words exchanged. Third, the information is all about themselves and their solution, not about their audience. Fourth, there is nothing different in what they say. It sounds like all the other alternatives the buyer is considering. Fifth, and finally, they do not know story. Being able to put on the glasses to see the buyer's story and how they might play a supporting role in that buyer's story. A basic premise of the Story War Academy is that a good story told well wins, both personally and professionally. I'm going to use that phrase a lot. A good story told well wins, to keep your emphasis on crafting the best stories, then honing your skills of story delivery to win your story war.
So let's just zero in on one of these key mistakes, and that is giving too much information. So what happens to the buyer or the audience when you give them too much information? Well, I'm reminded of a study that was done, and you've been to the grocery store, or here where I live, it's Costco. You go there every Saturday or whatever, and they have the tasting stations out. Well, this company decided to take some jam. So they took 6 jars of jam, and they wanted to correlate if choice and sales had anything to do with each other, if there's a correlation between them. And what they found was that they put 6 jars of different types of jams out. And for every person that took a taste test, 30% ended up buying the product. They thought, wow, this is great. We put 6 jams out. Wonder what would happen if we quadrupled that. So instead of 6 different flavors, they put 24 flavors out there. And so they quadrupled the choice. So what do you think happened to the sales? Well, of everybody that took a taste test of one of those 24 jams, sales went to 3%. Their sales went down 90%. This is a great example where less is more and more is less, really getting it down to just the essence. This is a critical thing when it comes to the story war and getting your sales message just right. So what does it sound like when sales is saying one thing, your technology people are saying somebody else, or marketing says something, or your executives all say something else? What does it sound like to the client? That reminds me of a video. All right, let's stop. That's painful just to listen to that. All right. So over the last 20 or so years, I've had the opportunity to work with all different kinds of great clients all around the world, from Schlumberger, Johnson & Johnson, SAP, and then a lot of political organizations and nonprofits from the left side to the right side. We have them all covered. So when I started my company in 2007, I realized it was important that we needed to have a test, the 3 tests of a winning sales and marketing message. So we've got 1, 2, 3. So let's explore what the first one is. But as I think about it, before I tell you what the first one is, that reminds me of a video this is a commercial from Crest, the toothpaste people. And imagine not following test number 1. It would look a lot like what happened in this commercial.
Who likes Halloween candy? Me! Well, we're going to replace candy with some healthy Halloween treats today.
These are called veggie fruit chews, guys.
This is the most worst I ever tasted. Not good. Mine tastes like broccoli. Yeah, mine tastes like poo-poo. It's kind of good, kind of bad.
Be honest with me, Adriana.
It's bad.
We have asparagus flavor, beet flavor, vitamin A and D.
Hey, you're saying disgusting stuff is good stuff, and it's disgusting.
You're gonna love these healthy nori pops.
Lollipops?
It also has a fibrous quality, which is gonna get your colon going in the morning.
They're disgusting.
These are tofu ghost mellows.
It tastes like rotten dough.
What about artichoke butter cups?
I threw up.
You threw up? Okay. They're delicious, healthy cupcakes.
It tastes like poopy pinata.
Counting riboflavin. B12. B12 is like the best treat you can get on Halloween.
It's like the worst thing I've ever tasted. I think I need water.
These are the treats that are replacing candy on Halloween. How do you like Halloween without candy?
I want candy!
So that leads us to test number one. Test number one, it's got to be emotional or meaningful for the client. And sometimes these lessons that we learn, some of the best lessons that we learn are sometimes the most painful ones we've learned. And that was the case in my career. So listen to this story that I tell to help us understand the first test of the winning message. Each one, first and foremost, it must be emotional to your buyer. I began my professional career when personal computers were just becoming commonplace. And I worked with a small software company called WordPerfect. We grew and became a market leader with the industry's best word processor. I worked in product marketing, so I knew all the cool features and functions. But then along came a little company from Redmond, Washington called Microsoft, with their word processor simply called Word. It was an inferior product, and I was quick to prove it at trade shows by showing how we could do more columns on the screen. We had 300,000 plus words in our dictionary and 85,000 words in our thesaurus. Microsoft, they make operating systems. But Microsoft was talking about real business problems and asking their customers, where do you want to go today? In time, I learned most buyers didn't care about the number of columns or words in the speller or thesaurus, but they did believe Microsoft would help them get to where they wanted to go. It was my first experience with losing a story war to an inferior product. What's most painful is I'm using that inferior word processor on my MacBook even today. If your compelling message is not emotional to your buyer, nothing else matters. Some of you may be thinking, well, some buyers, especially technical or financial ones, don't use emotion. I would respond with, you haven't looked close enough. One of the principles of good salesmanship that I've learned is that people buy on emotion and they justify with facts. Everyone is motivated by something. So everyone is motivated by something. So nothing is more compelling to your buyer than their own buyer's story. And we talk about story a lot, and it's probably good to ask yourself, what is story? And I spent years trying to understand what is story, coming up with a very simple definition for story. So we're going to use this model right now for story, and then I'll share some examples with you. I began looking at story in the same way. What are the first three ingredients that constitute story? I knew there had to be a hero or a protagonist, somebody that we would feel sympathy for. And the hero had to be doing something. They needed a purpose, a mission, or a journey. A hero on a journey. It was almost there, but it was missing something. A favorite quote from my story teacher, Robert McKee, filled in the missing piece. He said, conflict is to story as sound is to music. Let me repeat that. It's an overlooked and a critical element to good storytelling. Conflict is to story as sound is to music. Conflict.
Where would Star Wars be without Darth Vader? Or where would Dorothy be without the Wicked Witch of the West? This conflict or obstacle turns the hero's boring trip into a fascinating adventure. So, the DNA of story is a hero on some kind of a mission with an obstacle in their way. Let me illustrate this. First, we have a hero, say a girl. By itself, she's not very much interesting, not much to draw you in. We can make her more interesting by calling her, say, a little girl, but it still falls short. Second, let's give her a mission, like walking to grandma's house. A little girl walking to grandma's house. We can make it even more interesting with a little girl walking alone through the woods on her way to grandma's house. Still, it's not quite there. But add the third piece, an obstacle, like a wolf. A little girl walking through the woods on her way to her grandma's house meets a wolf. Now we have story. You might say, wait, where is the happy ever after? Stories, you know what? They don't need to have a happy ever after. Greek tragedies have taught us that once we have the pity for the hero because of their dilemma, story has begun its magic.
So, a hero on some kind of a mission with an obstacle in their way. Now, think about your buyer using those three specific traits. Now, here's three examples from three very different industries from real life customers of mine, and we're going to break it down into the buyer's story.
Let's say you sell a physical product like an iron roughneck, which is a strong robot that can quickly spin large pipes to help drilling companies connect and disconnect long pipes so they can reach water, oil, or gas miles under the ground. Your winning story is not about the torque capacity or spin speed of your robot. Your winning story likely begins with a hero like a rig manager, whose mission it is to safely and quickly connect and disconnect pipe segments, but is struggling with the conflict of robots with just two jaws that are deforming the pipes, making it harder to fully connect the pipes. However, the product you sell solves this problem by spreading out the force with three jaws that don't deform the pipes, ensuring a faster, stronger, and safer pipe connection. Or perhaps you sell an intangible product, such as software or service, like a data analytics dashboard used by companies with complex supply chains. Your winning story is not about your predictive analytics or your KPI algorithms. Your winning story likely begins with a hero like a plant manager, whose mission it is to reduce downtime and work in process, but is struggling with the conflict of having to go to different systems to oversee his workflow. And the product you sell solves this problem by integrating all the supplier systems so he can quickly see and easily keep the plant running with supplies arriving just in time. Or perhaps you sell ideas or an intellectual asset, such as a nonprofit committed to inspiring teenagers to live the ideals of a free and just society. And you do this with teacher training and resources. Your winning story is not about your principle-based lessons or scholar-vetted research. Your winning story likely begins with a hero like a high school civics teacher whose mission it is to lead civil discussions about current hot topics, but is struggling with the conflict of some students shutting down others with opposing views. And the product you sell, or should I say give away, solves this problem with free resources that are classroom tested and are trusted by 70,000 civics teachers across the country. You're in a story war anytime your ideal buyer does not see your full value and they settle for an inferior product. And sometimes that inferior product is your product with a deep discount.
So It's one thing to have a compelling message or a compelling story, but you know what? Being compelling to the buyer is not enough. And we're going to go into that in the second webinar next week, where we're going to talk about the second test of the 3 test, which is, I'll just tell you right now, it's differentiation and the idea of being different. You have to differentiate or you have to die. And we're going to build on top of this buyer story with a cool tool called the Arrowhead. The Arrowhead, if I can get this into the screen frame, the Arrowhead is the ability to take all of this information and get it down to one sharp point. A sharp point that focuses on the buyer's pain and the benefits that you provide. And it also has the value that they are looking for. And it can be delivered in 30 seconds. It provides the backbone so that the buyer can repeat your story. That's truly one thing that makes for a winning story, is that repeatability. So as we go into the final stages of today's webinar, I want you to think about the next steps. So I put this into the chat. So if you'd like to discuss your team's needs with me face to face, real time, live, go ahead and click or enter this link, get on my calendar, and we can talk live about your client. Or if you'd like to know more about the Story War Academy, go to that link below, and there's a recording that goes into much greater depth. I'll be sending out an email tomorrow with all of these links, as well as the link for our second webinar next week, going into the second test of the 3 tests of a winning sales and marketing story. So Q&A. If you've got some questions or a question you'd like to add, go ahead and put it in the chat. As you're thinking about that, one of the questions that I sometimes get is, the most important test really is just to be memorable. Oh boy, that's a mistake. If you're just going for memorable, it reminds me of an old commercial where somebody just wanted to be memorable. Watch this.
We want people to remember our name, Outpost.com. That's why we went to daycare centers all across this great country of ours and met with the youngsters. Then we permanently tattooed their foreheads with our name.
Put your head down.
Excessive? Maybe. But we're on a mission.
It's okay.
Try and find outpost.com now. All right. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those into the chat. All right. One of the questions, can you just tell us what our winning message is? No, part of the process is to help you create it, to bring your salespeople, your marketing, your development, and your executive folks and get them all on that same page. That's one of the most important pieces. So I'll help you create it, and I can pretty well tell when you've got it down, but you're going to have to go ahead and look at a lot of different avenues, and I'll help you do that. I know how to help you go through what we call the valley of despair to find that winning message. Okay, another question. All right, how would a message work for a complex sale that has many different stakeholders? All right, good point. If you're going to get your message down to one point and you've got multiple stakeholders and each one might have a slightly different thing, well, that's where an arrowhead comes in very handy, where you have a key point and then 3 or 4 supporting benefits. And I'm going to talk more about that next week, so I won't jump into that right now. Okay, any other questions? Cost? I'm not the cheapest thing out there, but I can tell you more about that later. But I'll tell you one thing, the most expensive thing is coming out with a product and not landing it with the client in the first go round and having to go back and retweak your message. That's the most expensive problem you're going to have. Okay, so let's just wrap it up. I've got one last video, and we talked about what it sounds like when you go to the client and your sales are saying one thing, marketing saying something else, and your texts, okay, that cacophony. But what happens when everybody's on the same page and you've got uniqueness, you've got credibility, and you're confident when you deliver it. Well, it's a beautiful thing. And it sounds like this. Now, this starts very soft to begin with. You almost can't hear it. That was the Royal Symphony in Amsterdam, one of the best orchestras in the world. Oh, I did neglect. I saw there was another question. How quickly can we test our message? Well, if you've got a message, I can give you some tools to test it right away. And then in a few sessions, we can help you come up with a great message. So folks, thank you for your time today. And I look forward to working with you. Look for the email tomorrow. I hope to see you on next session's webinar where we talk about the second test of a winning message. Have a great day and be your best story.